You ready? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole of Tuesday, April the 15th, 2014. I hope everyone has their income tax done.
What? We gotta get this meeting done.
Yeah, I know. Germana has to go do his income tax. All right, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller? Here. Mr. Brady?
Here.
Mr. Germana?
Here.
Mr. Gallagher? Here. Mr. Schron?
Here.
Ms. Conwell? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Hairston? Here. Ms. Simon? Here. Mr. Greenspan? Mr. Greenspan is absent today, and Ms. Conley?
Here.
There's a quorum.
Is there a motion to mark Mr. Greenspan's absence as excused? Favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Yeah, we say I guess. We hope he's enjoying his vacation. Please mark Mr. Greenspan as excused. All right, any public comment related to the agenda?
There is no public comment related to the agenda.
Okay. Item 4, item 2014-0088. Now, do you want to read all of these at one time? Because Mr. Applebaum's going to speak, and they're related to all of these items, so she'll just read them all.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to do that. Resolution number 2014-0088, a resolution approving a qualified management agreement with Hilton Management relating to management of a convention center hotel, authorizing the county executive to execute a qualified management agreement, a technical services agreement, a pre-opening services agreement, a room block agreement, and all other documents consistent with this resolution, authorizing and approving related matters and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective. Resolution number 2014-0089, a resolution authorizing an amendment to the design-build agreement with Turner Ozanne VAA, a joint venture, establishing a definitive guaranteed maximum price in the amount not to exceed, this amount will be determined, for design build services for the Convention Center Hotel project for the period November 13, 2013 through September 1, 2016, authorizing the county executive to execute the contract and all other documents consistent with this resolution, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective. And resolution number 2014-0090, a resolution providing for the acquisition by lease purchase of real property, including a convention center hotel facility, authorizing a lease purchase agreement with respect to the convention center hotel facility, authorizing and approving other documents relating to the convention center hotel facility and financing thereof, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
All right, Mr. Applebaum, are you prepared? Mr. Applebaum did an outstanding performance Saturday night at the Court of Nisi Prius. He played a physician, executing a prisoner.
I did.
It was a spoof, by the way.
If my parents were alive and had seen me as a physician, they would have been a lot happier. This is the second update. I gave an update on April 1st of where we stood on 3 resolutions. I'm going to give you another interim update today. Is that working? I'm sorry. I'll give you another interim update today. I am prepared between now and next Tuesday to have any individual meetings or do whatever else I can to provide you information. So let me talk a little bit about where we are today. I did that again because you wanted to see that, I know. So I'm just going to go back to that timeline for council action. Really what I'm mostly going to talk about is the GMP development today, because that's the thing that is the most ripe for discussion. I'll touch on where we are on the other 2 points, the QMA. We'll talk about the financing plan. Nothing really has changed there, but we do have Tim Oftermatt here to answer questions about that. So once again, on the process overview, just to remind you, this is the schedule that we have been talking about. We have 3 action items. The QMA, which is the Qualified Management Agreement with Hilton, the Guaranteed Maximum Price Amendment, and bond financing. These were introduced on March 25th. I gave you an initial preview of these items on April 1st, including I gave you a summary of what the terms and conditions of each of these are likely to be. There was you had your April 8th council meeting. This is the April 15th committee meeting we talked about, and then finally we'll have the April 22nd council meeting. And obviously, we're going to have some conversation about what additional information you have. And I know that this is all coming down to a lot of information toward the end, including the agreements. I apologize for that. We've always sort of known that this was going to happen, but I do want to report that we're making extraordinarily good progress, and these deals are shaping up very nicely from both a content point of view in terms of the quality of what we're getting and financially. I'm going to tell you as much as I can today. I'm going to tell you in advance. There's some information I still am choosing not to give you today because it relates to some financial issues that are still just in the process of being finalized, and it has to do with contingencies and some other numbers that I just don't want to finalize those negotiations in public. We're still just getting the final pieces of these done. But I'm going to give you as much information as I possibly can with the remainder of information very early next week. So, first of all, I do want to, as I said before, we are done with abatement, demolition, excavation. We completed pre-coring, and if you actually looked at the site right now, you would see that there is a caisson operation going on. You may have seen these very large tubes delivered to the site. Here's another picture taken today, and those large tubes that you see there, those are casings, steel casings. So we are actually putting in approximately 30 caissons that'll be directly beneath the tower. This is the operation that's going on right now. This is the operation that has to happen now in order to maintain the project schedule, because every day is critical on this project schedule. So what these caissons are ultimately going to be 160 feet deep. They come in 3 sections. You put the first 60 feet in with a slurry so that the pressure is maintained. Then you drill the next 60 feet and the final 60 feet. They're locked into the bedrock. They're filled with steel, rebar, and then concrete is poured under the slurry to the top. They're drained out, and there'll be 30 stilts on which this tower sits. And they're end bearing, which means that all of the load from the building is actually transferred all the way down to the bedrock, which is 160 feet down. This is the foundation system that we have to use. This is probably, in the whole project, one of the most difficult aspects of the project from an engineering and cost point of view. I'll talk about that in a little bit. It's also the biggest challenge. In some sense, when we get beyond this stage, assuming that this all goes well, that is one of the, will be over one of the largest risk factors on the project. We have contingencies built in for this risk, so it's funny that one of the greatest challenges is something that you'll never even see. It's the underground deep foundation system, but that's going on right now, and so far so good on that system, by the way. So I showed you this GMP process. This was the overview of how we get to the GMP. And I told you step 1 was the submittal of the final GMP proposal. Step 2 was a very intense reconciliation process. And step 3 was documentation of that process leading up to council approval. This is what I told you about on the 15th. Well, I will tell you now that what has occurred is that we, in fact, in this process on April 4th, we did receive on schedule the final or the official GMP proposal from the design builder. Now, I will tell you that obviously for months and months and months, we had been working with them, looking at scope, trying to get scope within budget, working on the various designs. But the actual official GMP proposal with the numbers came in on April 4th. I will also tell you that we have had continuous meetings from that, over the weekend from April 4th to April 7th, everything was reviewed. Starting from April 7th to today, we have had continuous meetings nonstop reconciling that GMP. Every day, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, we've had a room full of engineers, contractors, your management team, pouring through every page of the drawings, every page of the proposed pricing, and reconciling the number to try to make sure that scope and budget match and that we can get a GMP that we can that we have, that we can execute, that makes sense, that meets the programmatic criteria of Hilton. So this has been a very intense process. In fact, it is still going on today, although right now the major issues are beyond us and there's just some minor cleanup and ultimately the documentation that we're doing right now, although we did the documentation the whole way through. So where have we been with this process? And I'll let you, into the process. This is stuff that I wouldn't have talked about publicly before, but now that we're at a stage where I'm comfortable talking about this, the initial guaranteed maximum price proposal that came in was $234 million. That includes everything. That is from the design builder, it's all the pre-construction work, it's all the construction, it's all the closeout commissioning, it's everything they do from start to finish. It is the cost of the architect of record. Keep in mind it's design build, so the principal amount of, once we get through concept design, which we're at right now, it all transfers over to them to take the design development drawings and convert them into working drawings. We've talked about this before. We even talked about this on the convention center, which is the method that we use there. This is all in that number. All of their management services is in this number. A very comprehensive wrap-up insurance program, which takes on all insurance-related risk, is in this number, except for the builder's risk, which we have. But all of the workers' comp, all of the general liability, all of the environmental coverage, all there. It has a contractor, or that should say subcontractor, default insurance program. So this is actually insurance in lieu of bonds at the subcontractor level to take care of any default by a subcontractor. It's in that number. This number also includes a completion guarantee from Turner Construction Company's corporate parent. So while Turner Construction Company has the contract, we go up to the balance sheet of the parent, which is Turner Corporation, and we have obtained a corporate guarantee or a completion guarantee from the parent, all within this number, and this is also something that satisfies the rating agencies and the underwriters. So this is part of the security mechanism to assure us of that guaranteed price, and it's something that the underwriters take comfort in. This is, by the way, the same mechanism we used to satisfy underwriters on the Global Center and Convention Center project. So that number on the 4th was $234 million. I will also tell you that on the 4th, that $234 million was not a number that we found acceptable. It's also a number that the design builder knew would ultimately probably not be acceptable, so we had to find ways to bring that number down. I will tell you that that number, as the result of our effort between the 7th and the 15th with the great collaboration from Turner and their group, from our engineers, from subs and everybody else, we've succeeded in bringing that final reconciled number within an acceptable number for our target, which is $216.8 million. Now, there may be some very slight variation in that as we go through the documentation and are rounding things up and down and looking at the slew of numbers, but essentially it's at or about $216.8 million. I actually think it's going to be I hope it's going to be a little bit less in the next few days. So that is the GMP. So as you can see, it is basically, there's a difference there. We were able to pool $17 million plus out of the project in those last 2 weeks. Now, what does that mean? Did we actually take scope out? Did we reduce the project? Did we do something dramatic? And the answer is no. Let me tell you exactly how we got there. First of all, we made process modifications. Let me give you examples, and this is the beauty of being able to use this kind of a process. This what we call the PROS process and reconciling a GMP, working with our partner to go through and figure out ways to enhance the project and save money. So we made process modifications. What are things we can do working with the design builder and the contractors to make the project more attractive to them, to bring the number down and also make it better for us? So I'm going to give you an example of a process modification. And this is something that I've been talking about from the first time I ever met this council, when I talked about project process, and this is even when we talked about legislation. We talked about the benefits of very prompt payment to subcontractors. When we talked about the minority contracting community, the small business community, and Councilman Jones, you know about this. We always talk about the fact that there's two things you can do to really have contractors work for you and give you your best pricing. And one thing is to have very prompt payment, and the other thing is to have prompt claims resolution. Well, we had, and there are public bodies that do not pay promptly. I won't say who they are, but they're public bodies where you may not, as a subcontractor, get paid for 60 or even 90 days. We did an extraordinarily successful job of promptly paying contractors on the convention center and global center project. Everyone has talked about that and how beneficial it was. Well, contractors are now looking at the county and they're saying, you know, we really like doing business with you, and if you can really pay us promptly, that is so important to our bottom line and our method of doing business that we will reduce our pricing to you if you can come up with a very prompt and effective method of payment. By the way, this is beneficial for us as a county because we want to have the reputation of being very good prompt pay, of being very efficient, because then we get the best contractors to come to work for us and lower pricing. Well, we were able to get, from this process modification, we were able to lower the price of the project by $1 million approximately. And the way that we're doing it is we are developing, we're going to put in place a payment process that gets payment to contractors within 15 days. Here's how we're going to do it. And this is a method, a tried and true method that can work. We're going to pay within a calendar month. We've already talked about it with the county. We've talked about it with Bonnie and others. And the way it's essentially going to work is this. At the beginning of each month, we will start the process. We'll work with the contractors. We'll get what's called a pencil pay application. They'll give us a draft pay application. We'll be able to review that within the first 15 days. We'll get the final pay application by the 15th of the month. We'll get it approved, and then we'll get the payment. Working with Turner, we'll get our payment out, and they'll get their payment to subcontractors within 15 days. If we can do that, and there's no reason that we can't do that, number one will be the promptest paying public body, which is very, very good. Now, there's other, by the way, in other communities, there's bodies that have done this and had great results. Not only will we do that, we'll be able to reduce the cost of the project, as we've done just through the bidding process. We'll also support minority businesses, subcontractors, and small business because they rely on cash flow to survive. And if you want to talk about a way, we've talked about economic development, we've talked about bonding. The best way you can support small business is to pay them promptly. That's exactly what this is going to do, and we get an economic benefit. So that's one example of one of the process modifications we made to bring the price down. Now, there's other things that are process modifications that are highly technical, but I wanted to give you that as an example. Another thing we did is we went through an exercise of value analysis. What are things in the building that where there's a certain price associated with it, where we actually can do things a different way, take some money out of the project, yet not affect the customer experience, not affect the value of it, not affect revenue generation. So I'll give you examples of things that we did. We were able to come up with a lot of back-of-the-house efficiencies. I'll give you an example. There are offices in the back of the house. There are spaces in the back of the house that are storage spaces. They don't need a high level of finish, quite honestly. So we were able to find back-of-the-house spaces where we could, and this is not a place where the public goes, but where we were able to, basically reduce the quality of finish, still having serviceable finishes, areas where there's storage, where you don't need to have any kind of much of a fancy ceiling. And we just found areas back of the house where we could get efficiencies and take money out. Nothing that any of you will notice, nothing the public will notice, and nothing that will impact on the revenue. Just sensible decisions where we're able to find ways to save money in the project. Another example is in the guest rooms. We were able to, and by the way, this is debatable. You've seen guest rooms where there's no tub and there's a shower. You've seen guest rooms where there is a tub and there is a shower, and you can have your opinions about what you like or what you don't like, but we basically modified the tub shower mix in queen Rooms, and we actually were able to save money. And by the way, one of the things we did, sometimes in a queen room, one theory Hilton would have is you have a shower only. And by the way, for a business traveler, that's probably pretty good, but in a lot of queen rooms, you also have families, and they do like tubs. So we actually were, in a lot of these rooms, we actually have the tub shower combination that actually saved money. It didn't cost more, it saved money. But that's an example of a savings. You can debate which one you like, but we saved money in changing that combination. We also we did a more efficient guest bathroom configuration, which saved money. Just to do it more efficiently, more effectively. The rooms are very tasteful, they're very nice. I'll talk more about how you'll see those rooms, but these are things that saved money in the end, where they didn't compromise at all the value, they didn't compromise at all the guest experience. We just found ways to save money because there's different ways to skin a cat. We eliminated scope duplication. We found areas in the project where there was some scope duplication. The most important thing we do is scope clarification. There are many situations, keep in mind that this is being done on design development documents. These aren't final completed documents. So a contractor looks at the document and he says, you know what, there's some ambiguity there. I'm not exactly sure, you know, what's intended, what'll be in the final drawings. So to hedge the bet, I got to put a little bit more money on that line item. Now, if you can give me information and give me some specifics, I may be able to take some of the money out because I don't have to have my own little contingency in there. So what we do is we go line by line, we clarify things between our conceptual architect, Cooper Carey, and the design build team. And as we clarify things and clarify scope, they're able to say, you know what, if that's the case, if you can document that that's what's going to be in the final DD set, which they now have, by the way, then if that's the case, we can take some money out. So there's a lot of scope clarification that it enables us to get more certainty and to take dollars out. And that's what we basically spend day after day doing. So at the end of that, we were able to achieve these savings. I will tell you that all critical elements that you've seen on the project have been retained. We did not take anything major out. If you look at the building, it is the same building. If you talk about, you know, the bar, yes, the bar is there. All the restaurants, all the square footage is there. So everything that you have seen and heard about, or all the major elements are all in the project. We've eliminated nothing. All the rooms are there, all the square footage is there, but we were able to do what we're supposed to do, which is go with a number, find ways to get the cost within an acceptable budget, and that's what we have done. Now, how does that GMP impact the budget at that number? Well, I will tell you that on the project, both our sources of money and uses have somewhat increased. And I've talked a little bit about the uses. I'll come back to that. We have no new revenue source on this project, which is to say we're using the same sources that you've always seen, but those sources are actually generating somewhat more revenue than previously anticipated. By way of example, in the hotel itself, we have revenue opportunities. We're putting money into it, so the cost goes up for some of these things, but the revenue that we get out also goes up. And I'll give you examples of that. The bar, yeah, there's a cost associated with putting that bar up with the rooftop, but it also generates revenue, and that's all built into the model. We have a laundry. Now, we may take this out, but I doubt it. The laundry costs money, costs several $1 million, but it also generates revenue that we realize over time. These health rooms, we'll see how many we do, but that's one of the examples. It generates revenue. The rate's going to be higher, it generates more revenue. There's other examples of this. Improved economic conditions. The model itself, and Tim can tell you about this ultimately, but our revenue model itself is simply generating more revenue, primarily because of interest rates. But the model is generating more revenue, which is good. And the terms and conditions of some of our deals that we have, and I'm not going to get into this yet, but in some cases it allows us to have enhanced revenue production, or less expense, I should say, and maybe that's a mix of a source and a use. But all these things lead to some more revenue that we're going to have in our model. And of course, we've always had contingencies in this model that we're going to talk about before Tuesday. I'm still hesitant to get into that yet because we have to cross the T's and dot the I's. We also do have some increased costs in there. It's the same cost that I've told you about almost from day one. The one thing that happened very early on in the project is the need to go to this deep caisson foundation system. which has added both some cost and time, and we've known about this from day one. Initially, there was some view by our engineers, by Turner and others, that we could use a mat foundation for the building. As you may recall the discussion, this was a mat foundation, permitted a parking structure, but it didn't require these very deep, sophisticated caissons. What occurred, and this building, by the way, is at or about the same height as a building in Cleveland that was successfully done with a mat foundation. Unfortunately, the engineering studies came back, and for a variety of technical reasons, we determined that we simply could not use the mat foundation, and that was because the deflection over time, the amount of settlement over time was simply too much for this building and for the hotel structure on that site. It just couldn't be done. So that meant that we did go to the deep foundation system, which is this deep caisson foundation system. That added about $7 million of direct cost to the project and about $1 million of acceleration. And that is really the only, that plus one other thing are the only things which have added cost. We also have some added acceleration. If we're going to make to ensure the April 1 date, there's about $3 million of additional acceleration to make that April 1st date. We've talked about this. Now, we will get a benefit because I hope that's okay. That's the reporter calling me about this. If you can find it, Bonnie, just get it. Sorry about that. So there is acceleration. Is that Mrs. Applebaum? Let me turn it off.
It's Andrew calling from the other chair over to you.
That is Mrs. Applebaum. If I don't turn it off, it's just going to keep going and going and going and going. So I've taken care of that. I'm sorry about that. So in any event, there is about $3 million to make sure we complete by April 1st. Now, we can make a decision later on. If we don't want to do this, we could decide not to do it. At least part of that, you know, by way of example, if we weren't to have a convention, the RNC or the DNC, we could make that decision. I will tell you, though, that by accelerating the job, we will be bringing in revenue in all of those months.
Can we assume that's a typo on this?
Pardon?
Can we assume that's a typo? That's 2016?
I'm sorry. Yes, you sure can.
I thought you were going to really be fast, but
I did that quickly. Yeah, it's 2016. So the bottom line is, but I'm also going to tell you what you see there are all of the increased costs on the project. It basically comes from two sources. We will have an evaluation for you, even if we don't do the conventions. We still have an economic benefit because every month the hotel completes early. It brings revenue into the hotel. It brings revenue into the convention center. It brings revenue into the community. We still will be able to make the decision, a go, no-go decision on some of that acceleration later on, which we'll present. And we're going to have that analysis done. Obviously, if we get the convention, it's a no-brainer. We do it. If we don't get the convention, there may be a decision we can make. But I will tell you, there's a lot of shows and a lot of events that want to come in if the convention doesn't come in or in the time when the conventions wouldn't be here. So we have that decision to make later on. And that could be a savings if we decided not to go forward. So we don't have to make that decision right now. Part of it we have to make right now. We have to decide on the acceleration of the caissons right now and some other acceleration money, but other stuff we could save. So the bottom line is that those are the only areas where we've actually had increased costs. As a matter of fact, through the rest of the project, we've been able to deliver this project just as anticipated, at the budget as anticipated. And in fact, we've generated more revenue sources. Now, what we could have done is we could have taken elements out of the project. If we didn't have the money for it, we would have never proposed adding the bar. We would have never proposed adding some of these other elements. But our revenue model does demonstrate that we can easily do those elements. So the bottom line is, when we look at how that impacts the GMP, right now we have what we're referring to as a development budget, which has a few more elements in it of about $272 million. That's exclusive of some other money that we've always had. We have what we call a design development contingency above that of about $4 million. Now, I will tell you that it is still possible. We have the GMP documents. There's a final set of design development documents. If there's anything that we have asked for that represents a scope increase, which is revealed in those documents, because there is a reconciliation process. if we found more scope, there is a contingency for that purpose. I don't, I hope not to use it for that purpose, but we have it. We've reserved it for any elements that show up in design development that are not in the GMP documents. So that's always been part of the process, and that's there. In addition to that, there's actually other contingencies above and beyond that that are built into the financing plan, and we'll go over that next week. I will also tell you, though, that to get to this number, we have not used any of the contingency within the development budget. So that the development budget has contingency. It had a 5% contingency. We haven't touched it yet. So we have reserved, normally at this point in time, you would use some of that contingency. We've kept it all. We have all the contingency available to make sure that any risk that shows up on the project, we're just as protected now as we've ever been. So we have a hefty contingency within the project budget as we go forward. So we think that we're in very good shape, and when you see the numbers from Tim next week, you'll see more of the picture on where we stand on the GMP and the GMP development. The point I want to make is, though, that not only do we have a project that's within our budget with additional contingency, both within and on top of the development budget, the project scope has remained intact. The number of rooms, meeting, restaurant space, all the revenue generation elements have been intact. The level of finish has remained intact. We've actually added certain revenue producing additions, the rooftop bar, laundry, health rooms, et cetera. The space is first class state of the art. By the way, I was asked this question at the Grand Assize. I was asked this question, which is how does the grand ballroom of this hotel compare to the grand ballroom of the Renaissance where you were last Friday? And I will tell you that the Renaissance Grand Ballroom is advertised at 14,900 square feet. The ballroom of this hotel is 22,000 square feet. The junior ballroom of this hotel is 13,500 square feet. So the events that this can handle, the revenue generating potential that Hilton sees in it is pretty significant, and we've maintained all of that. None of that has been compromised in this process.
Now, we have a couple of questions. I don't know if this is a good time to interrupt you, or do you
Okay.
want to keep going?
No, this is a good time.
Okay,
Well,
Mr. Brady?
You may be getting to this right away. We've seen renditions
Yes.
of the hotel and, pretty, extremely contemporary, fascinating designs. Are we going to, is that what we're going to see?
Yes.
Is that what we're going to do?
None of that has been compromised. None of it has been compromised. Everything you've seen there, if I show you right now the renderings, there's one I actually wanted to give you today. But if I show you the rendering of the hotel today versus what you've seen, you would not, the only differences you would see would be something that I actually pointed out to you. I would tell you that you'd have to be very technically apt to actually see some subtle differences. The only differences you'll see, and I don't think you could pick this out, is the rooftop bar. The opening at the top is a floor higher, okay? And I can actually pull something up here. I didn't put it on here, but I can. There's a slight modification. There may be a slight modification on the west side. What you saw on the west side of the building, you saw a canopy, not a canopy, but there was a covering over where you walked in. There's simply some technical modifications on how the columns look and how the canopy looks. If I showed you both renderings side by side, you probably wouldn't even pick out the difference. And if you did, it wouldn't make a material difference to you. It's just, and I'll show them to you, but basically what you saw is what you get. There is nothing, the way the building is shaped, the twist, all that is in. Now, I will tell you, that there were times during this process that we were prepared to take some of that out. We might have straightened the top of the building. We may have taken the twist out. Those things cost money, but we fought. We fought to maintain every critical element of this building, and we have succeeded in doing so. So there's nothing that you have seen that we have advertised, if you will, that is going to be compromised right now. And that's a very important, and by the way, if we had compromised anything, or if there's ever a reason to do that, even because something I doubt it, you will know that. You will know that, but there's nothing like that.
Mr. Shrine and Ms. Conwell.
Thank you, Madam President. Your GMP, and you talked about one of the contingency areas is the 30 caissons that are going down the 160 feet. Is that what's in the GMP right now, a
Yes.
160-foot caisson?
Yes.
And how far did we go in the building right next door to get those caissons in?
I think the depth of the caissons was essentially the same. The amount of load, the density of the caissons was not the same, and the
Right.
loading was different. The depth was the same. They still had to get down to bedrock.
Okay, so 160 feet is where, it's where you hit the bedrock is what's the determining factor as far as the depth.
Yes.
The diameter is what your load is.
Subject to
I assume.
loads.
Right. And you said that we now have a 4/1/16 date. Have we told that to all the different teams that are bidding on bringing a convention here, both the Republican and Democratic? Because that's, to me, that's the first time I've heard an April 1st date, unless it's been
Well,
publicized.
what we have told them, they know the dates because the people who are bringing the convention to town hammer this out of me every day, and they keep trying to advance it, which of course we can't do. But here, to be very clear about the date, the April 1 date is the substantial completion date. It's not the opening date. So what happens, I think I mentioned this before, but what's happening is Hilton starts their move-in 2 months before substantial completion, and then we're out of the building, or Turner's out of the building on April 1. Hilton still has until June 1 to complete their move-in, and that is the date that
Okay.
the conventions know.
I didn't want to walk away here thinking that
No.
4/1 was
No,
a
the
go live
conventions
date.
know June 1, but the
Okay.
conventions have also been told how we get there. So they've been told, I believe they've been told the story, that the building will be substantially completed April 1 with the first event occurring after Hilton moves in on or about June 1.
Okay, and with all the savings that you've been able to generate, was there anything of an iconic nature that you wanted to put in that you held back that now with this kind of differential out there, you say, wow, this would really be a game changer for an I am pay type look or whatever it happens to be that we left out?
Here's what we've done, and by the way,
I mean, this is the time, either put it in now or it never goes in,
Well,
obviously.
And by the way, I mean, to the extent we generated savings, we had to generate some money to take care of the caisson situation, obviously. But here's actually how this works. We do have a list of what we refer to as ad alternates. So there are a series of things that if we have the money, we can still put into the building. And the way that we do this is there's a time frame when we can put these things into the building. They mostly relate to finishes and some other enhancements. And the way it works is there's two sources of money to pay for additional enhancements if we want to do it. One source is actually Turner itself. Even though their contingency right now, as of the time that we start this GMP, their contingency is approximately 6% of the cost of the work. So their contingency is in the vicinity of $11, $12 million. Now, as we get to critical phases in the work, their contingency by contract is reduced. So there's a point in time where they start out with this $12 million. If they have buyout savings, and we still think we're going to squeeze some more money, we think there's going to be some buyouts where there's actually more money that goes into contingency. When we get to a point in time after the foundations are done and after the project is 95% bought out, I believe this is accurate, that contingency drops to 4.5%, plus any buyout savings. So there may be money which we harvest, and it can go to buyout alternates. And it will be reduced a couple times. The county, may, during the course of the process, if we're not spending contingency we may also perhaps make the determination to look at some of those ad alternates. And at the appropriate time, those would be the kinds of change orders, if we do them, that we would come back to you. Let me point out, and you may recall this, we used the same technique on the convention center, and we did harvest $2 million in savings. And that money actually went to procure the mezzanine level in the Global Center. And with that money, that's where the whole office structure is. If those offices were not on that mezzanine level, they would have taken up other valuable square footage in the convention center. So we did use contingency savings there to buy additional scope. We could do it here as well if we have the savings.
Do we have a covered drop-off with this building? Because having been to enough conventions at in our current convention, if you were there in the winter or in a rainstorm, unfortunately, there's no pull-in, there's no way to drop off, and everybody gets wet.
The answer is there's a covered drop-off. There's a covered drop-off on the front door side. Right now, there is an alternate. There is designed a covered canopy that goes to the restaurant from West Mall Drive as well. That, I can't remember right now, quite honestly. That may be, it's either in the base or it's an ad alternate. I think it's still in the base. But the main entrance definitely has the covered canopy.
But that would be the kind of thing that this council
Yeah.
person would like to see, because
It's there.
there's nothing more frustrating than you go to these events, you get dressed up, and all of a sudden, you're in the middle of a rainstorm, and
I'll
can't
give
get
you an
dropped
example
off.
of something that may be an ad alternate. We may also have put in, we may have heated pavers, something that actually, now look, even if there's ever ice down there on the pavers, we have maintenance that takes care of it. We may have as an ad, you could have heated pavers as an ad alternate, whether or not you save money because you don't have, labor, but that would be the example of something I think is an ad alternate. But the cover is absolutely there. It's all there.
I'm sure Cleveland Thermal could run a pipe underneath there and produce that heat for us.
Okay. Any other questions before I go on?
Yes, Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Mr. Applebaum. In your previous discussion, you said you went from the GMP to 234 to 216, but you also stated that you could see that dropping, you would try to get that to drop even more. Do you have any idea what efficiencies or whatever that would bring if you were able to drop that even more?
Do I have any idea of if I dropped it
You
more?
stated earlier that you got from
Might drop
234
more.
to 216, and at that 216, that isn't set in stone. You're looking for some more
Yes.
additions to get that down.
And let me tell you where that might come out of. As we go through, what has actually occurred, just to be very technical about it, so let me explain. There's a document that the GMP is based on. It's the GMP set of design, okay? There's one further iteration of design that the conceptual architect is responsible for, which is it's called the full design development set. These two document sets are close. They're not identical. Right now, we are pouring through the final design set to see if there's any differences, okay? There may be some differences that actually take the cost down. There may be some differences that could bring the cost slightly up. That's why we have the $4 million, just in case. And by the way, we'll have the decision of anything that brings it up. But we think there's still some design issues, that some back of the house, some more savings we can find. That's one thing. The other thing that we think is going to happen, though, is we've made some assumptions. There's some aspects of this project which have been bid out. There's a lot of aspects of the project that have not been bid out. And although we have a guarantee on the high side, because we have a guaranteed maximum price, there's still the ability to have savings through the bidding process that could bring the number down. And if that number comes down and we have more savings, we get the benefit of the savings. In other words, the buyout savings goes into it creates contingency, and that creates that pool from which we could buy more ad alternates. That's how the process works.
Thank you. And just in the back of the house efficiencies, you stated no one would be able to see that. That and the guest rooms / tubs, is that something that Hilton agreed on?
Oh, yeah.
As far as their standards and their other hotels?
We don't do anything without getting the buyoff from Hilton. Now, I will tell you, Hilton's in the room during this whole process, because there's a lot of things that there's a lot of things that we would keep in mind. That one of the people that we have at PMC is formerly designed hotels. So Ellis Katz, who works with me, is constantly challenging and pushing to find these areas. There's things that they've done in other hotels. In some cases, there are ideas that get accepted. In some cases, Hilton says, you know what, We appreciate it, but according to our brand standard, we insist that you not do that. So they're there at every step of the way. That protects us too, by the way, because it means it meets Hilton standards. But this is as between, this is a four-way thing. It's Hilton insisting on their standards, it's the architect designing, it's Turner pricing, and it's us on your behalf challenging. And then it's all their consultants. So this is a very robust process, but there's a lot of checks and balances in it. Hilton would not let us do anything that compromises their ability to run a first-class state-of-the-art hotel.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm still unclear about how we resolve the parking issue.
I can talk about that. In the QMA, so I will tell you that Hilton made a determination, an initial determination of what they actually required to support the hotel for parking. And what Hilton required to support the hotel was 400 spaces, which are within the vicinity of the hotel. They didn't have to be attached to the hotel. They didn't have to be under the hotel. They had to be within the vicinity of the hotel. Their principal concern, by the way, is actually valet parking. Drive-up parking is beneficial, but their real concern is valet parking, but they're concerned about both. So their criteria is 400 spaces. It's their belief that on average, and in their pro forma, they'll probably be using, for hotel operations, about 150 of those a night. Because most people do not drive to a convention center hotel. Most people are coming in other ways, and it's not drive up for a convention center hotel. This is not people driving from the suburbs. This is people traveling from out of town. What we have done, what we have right now, is we have the commitment, and we're meeting this commitment and more. We're giving them as much space as they want in the Huntington Park Garage. We are going to go through a program of fixing up the Huntington Park Garage, and Ms. Teeuwen can address your concerns about it, because frankly, there is a budget for doing that. Hilton has walked through the garage. They would agree that the Hilton part of it does have to be reconfigured. And they're in conversations. I know Bonnie's in conversations about this right now, so there is a commitment. We couldn't satisfy this, by the way. We couldn't get these 400 spaces underneath our building even if we wanted to, and if we did, the amount of money it would cost would be prohibitive. So we are planning to reconfigure the Huntington Park Garage. It will also, once we do that, it will generate revenues far beyond the revenues that you're generating out of the Huntington Park Garage right now.
Are you adding spaces, Madam Chair, to the Huntington Park Garage? You're making improvements, but do we expect to have more spots available?
Well, by definition, you'll have more spots only because even if you didn't add physical space, what happens is a substantial part of the garage goes to valet parking. And as soon as you segment off or cordon off a portion of the garage for valet parking, valet parking, unlike drive-in parking, you can get, 30% more? I can't remember the number. Valet, 30%? Well, somewhere between 20. I do think it's 30. But you can get a lot more spaces because when you valet park, they park them in like sardines, as you know. So you're going to get a lot more spaces and a lot more revenue. Now, what else you might do with the garage when you reconfigure, I believe that's being studied right now. And Bonnie, I don't know if you want to comment on the garage.
You can talk all you want, but I'm going to tell you, you got access to justice issues here. You got jurors, you got lawyers, you got people, and these people have no place to park. And I won't be here, but there's going to be people, somebody sitting in this chair telling you, and there's going to be judges down here, because jurors are complaining now. And that garage is in bad shape. I don't know, you're going to have to put a lot of money in it, but still, you have access to justice issues, and you've got to have places for lawyers, jurors, participants to park. And that justice, and they're already short spot spaces over there. I know we're going to pick up few when the county people move over there, but there's still issues of parking.
I think we have answers to both, but let me start with Bonnie, and she'll talk about the condition, and I'll talk about the plan.
I mean, I've heard this before, but I mean, if you go on that garage, I mean, there's like cement falling down, there's water falling down on your car. It's in terrible shape.
So in regard to the condition of the parking deck, that was to one of my concerns when I first came to the county, the condition of the parking garage. This past summer, it's almost a year ago, we did some repairs in regard to expansion joints. So we did some minor repairs and we replaced the ramp going from the second to the first floor. We have coming up, we're in the process of hiring a consultant to do detailed plans for concrete repair, further water infiltration, some of the major repairs, the sprinkling system. Those are what we consider major rehabs, and we're hiring a consultant to do those type of repairs also to that.
The plan is this: you would have to fix the Huntington Park garage anyway. So
Because you need it for people who are using the Justice Center to park.
Yes,
And now you're gonna take 400, all these spots for the convention thing.
No, that's not the plan. What we're doing is it's a two-part plan. There's a recognition that there also has to be spots for people in the Justice Center. It's also the case that on the west side of the Justice Center, there are opportunities for additional parking. There's actually folks that want to participate. So I think you're going to find out that there's going to be a proposal made to you that may take the Justice Center. It may take the front door of the Justice Center and reorient the front door of the Justice Center and actually place closer parking to the Justice Center for use of the Justice Center, where you can increase the revenues you get out of the Huntington Park garage for the hotel and the convention center, and then create another methodology for parking at the Justice Center, which is right there by what would be a new front door of the Justice Center. I think this is something that's going to be laid out, Bonnie, but I think, we're not quite, it's not quite ripe yet.
The main door will be west.
I would like to come back to that discussion, because I think we understand exactly what you're talking about, and I think there's a plan for that that's actually going to enhance everything about how the county delivers services and actually your revenue potential when it's done.
Madam President, before, I had one more question, but on this parking issue, I've said this several times that I'm not going to commit to anything until I know what the plan is to ensure that the litigants and the judges and people who frequent our courts on a daily basis are going to be able to have access to the building. I'm not comfortable with going forward without knowing how many spots are going to be reserved, not for the hotel attendees or guests, but for our courts.
Well, I'm going to leave it to Bonnie and her group to talk about that. I mean, that garage has 1,100 spaces in it. The amount of spaces that are going to be made available, the amount of spaces that are made available when you move out of the county administration building is going to be greater than the amount of spaces that the hotel is going to use.
Okay, so I will get the question to Bonnie. I don't see her now because there's a pillar in the way, but I'm going to need to know how many spaces are going to be reserved for the courts and non-hotel guests by Tuesday.
Okay.
How many spots are available now to them, and what we expect to have reserved for that? Okay.
So, and I would add to what Jeff is saying that this Greater Cleveland Partnership is also performing a parking study for the whole general area to not only look at just our parking, but parking in the immediate vicinity, and that should define what the needs of the parking is in that area. So
No, I know, but we still need to know how many spots are going to be reserved by Tuesday for the courts and the litigants. That's an easy, if there's 1,100 spots available, how many are going to be reserved, at least in the AM? The last question I have, if there's a legal dispute between a guest and the hotel, who handles that legal work? Is it the Hilton LLC management company, or does that come back to the county?
That is a great question, and that there are pages and pages and pages of the QMA that get into this in great detail. And the bottom line is Hilton manages it. The bottom line is there's a significant insurance program that takes care of every insured risk, which is part of the program. The bottom line is, at the end of the day, though, Hilton is a pure manager. So there is to the extent that, if there's gross negligence or something like that, that's Hilton's responsibility. If it's ordinary negligence, it's insured, that takes care of it. But there are potential costs that do impact the bottom line, and they would be a normal operating expense. So there are certain types of issues that would go to the bottom line and would impact the revenue stream of the hotel. Now, of course, that impacts Hilton because it impacts their fee structure. They're incentivized not to let that happen, but it is part of the cost and expense structure of the hotel. So we get the benefits. We do take some risk, but most of it's insured risk, and any gross negligence is Hilton's responsibility.
So if there's a regular negligence claim and Hilton is on the hook for that, the guest would deal directly with Hilton Management LLC and whoever they're using to cover that claim?
Once again, the way that would work, it depends on who the guest sues, as you know. If the guest sues Hilton, Hilton deals with it. In certain conditions where it's insured, Hilton has the right to assign counsel. There's certain other types of claims where we have the right. If there's any potential risk for us, we have the right.
We'll be on every lawsuit, so.
We'll be an additional insured under that policy. So anytime there's a claim made against us, we are an additional insured, and that policy picks up our defense. And depending on the nature of the claim, we may or may not have the right to comment on counsel. If it's a fully insured claim, with just the deductible exposure, which is part of the business plan, we probably won't have a right. If there's ever any exposure, some independent claim against the county, or some way that we wouldn't be covered because we did something independent of the project, and it's hard to imagine what that would be, we would have rights to, with respect to counsel. And these are some pretty detailed technical provisions that we've poured over, and I can bring you up to speed, but it's essentially what I've indicated.
Mr. Brady?
Madam President.
Mr. Brady, then Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. For those of you who mostly know, and for those of you who might have forgotten, or maybe to the new member who might not know, the council president appointed me to the 3-member board that is temporarily governing this process. And these questions, let me say, first of all, there is no question in my mind that every member of this council wants to be helpful and wants to build this hotel, understands it needs to be built in order for the convention center to be successful, and wants to cooperate in every way possible. But we're going to have a vote next Tuesday. That's a big hurdle. And so, I want to make it clear to the council members that are here, that if there's something that's really bothering you, let's try to clear it up as best we can between now and next Tuesday. And so far, what I'm hearing is that the question's been brought up from the very beginning, the parking, and I remember all the different, places we were and talked about and did, is an issue. Now, I personally don't expect you to have the whole thing resolved, but you need to, I mean you personally, but I guess, you're standing there, and to the administration, you need to come clean with us. If there are plans or alternatives that you're thinking of in terms of building a parking garage somewhere, in terms of whatever it is you're doing or considering doing, you need to be as clean, come to us as clean as possible. You owe it to us. You owe it to us to do that. I don't want any secrets, and as the person who represents the council on that board, I am going to be very unhappy if I feel like we have not been given as much information as you can possibly give us. And sometimes I know this is a difficult process because it's in public. I don't underestimate the challenge. Because the council president's going to be gone next year, I will also be chairing this meeting. And, I'm going to be looking for as much information as I can over the next 7 days. And this one is one that's been hanging over us all this time. And so just tell us the truth, to the extent you possibly know it, and what the alternative plans might entail in the future, because we're going to be asked to throw our hat over the wall. And then we're going to be told, oh, by the way, we've got to build a 6-story garage over here, and we're going to have to pay for that, or this or that. And I'm just saying, we ought to, we're for this thing, but we want to know what we're doing. We want to know what we're doing.
Let me
And
come
the
back.
public has a right to know as well.
Let me just, I want to make 2 comments to clarify. So I want to come back to the parking issue. And I'm going to tell you everything I can tell you right now on parking. First of all, I want to tell you that Hilton is not concerned about this issue for the following reason. Hilton finds with this kind of hotel that what they mostly rely upon, to the extent there's parking, it's mostly valet parking, okay? And you can find, by the way, we've had so many, within 2 blocks, 3 blocks of the hotel, there's many, many operators who are willing to cut a deal to make as much valet parking available as we could possibly want. There's a lot more parking in downtown Cleveland than you might imagine. So that we could take valet parking out of the Huntington if we wanted to and contract for that. I'll show you the Hilton assumptions on that, and they're content with that. They do a lot of downtown hotels with a lot less parking opportunity than we have right now. It's one of the reasons that it's not beneath the building. So we could limit only the Huntington to drive-in, but frankly, we have the opportunity as a county to gain revenue by making that hotel, that parking available. I agree with you. You can't compromise what you need, which is why you need to find out what you need, and that's something that we'll rely on Bonnie to talk to you about. Now, having said that, because we are going to have availability, there's also work that needs to be done in the garage. We've talked about reconfiguring the garage. The one great thing about the Huntington Park garage, it will always be the closest garage to the convention center, okay? It will always be the closest garage. Forget about the hotel, it's the closest parking for the convention center. And you want to harvest, but those are used jointly. You want to harvest it if you can. There can be other opportunities if we need them for the Justice Center, and there is discussion, really no more than what I've said, about looking at those opportunities. There are people who are interested in talking to us about parking on the other side of the Justice Center. It hasn't gone further than that. I'm just telling you that's where the conversations are right now. So there's no plan beyond looking at this, but there's a study. There are 3 studies being done right now. We're going to have ample parking for the hotel. You'll get the numbers that you need in terms short term to make sure there's no problem with respect to who can be in that garage. But this is it has to be solved. But I think there's a lot of potential. There are a lot of good ways to solve it, and we've been looking at them.
And I would add to that, in addition to the potential private development that's on the West 3rd Street side, the study that we did of the Justice Center, there were 7 opportunities that were presented. And one of those 7 opportunities did take into consideration adding additional parking on the site of the Justice Center. So that's an opportunity that as we move forward with our Justice Center complex, if we move forward on our Justice Center complex, if that's one of the opportunities that we'd like to look into.
Well, those numbers need to be included in the numbers we're talking about to build this hotel.
Well, there's going to be, if you do additional parking, you're going to generate additional revenue. So you'll have a revenue opportunity as well.
Well, I realize.
Right now.
Generate revenue.
Yeah. Right now, this model actually assumes that the Hilton is going to pay the county for spaces in your building. So right now, you're not giving those spaces to Hilton for free. Hilton is paying for those spaces from you. So obviously, if you're going to create new parking, you have to take into account the revenue generated by the parking. It's not fair to say that someone else pays for your for additional parking and you keep the revenue. You have to keep it balanced. But I understand what you're saying. I was going to continue here. Yes.
Couple, hopefully quick. First, when you said that there were no significant changes to the scope of the project in the reconciliation process, other than the back of the house kind of things that you did, were there any reductions or changes in either materials or finishes?
There are some modifications in some finishes. Nothing of note in public spaces. There are some areas, I will tell you, where there's some granite, which is now precast in areas of the building. I doubt that you would necessarily notice that. There's some of that. But in terms of the curtain wall system, all the fancy stuff you've seen, that all remains intact. There may be some places in the guest room areas where you've got some carpet tile things going on. And there may be some add alternates where we've taken certain areas and said we'll carpet that, and maybe as an add alternate we'll tile. But once again, these are minor issues, and oh, by the way, if I never told you about them in the first place, you'd never know. But we will show you. I mean, I'll give you the list of all those so you can see what they were and what they are. This is intentional, by the way. You always start out with the designer who, frankly, they always over-design, and then you take it out until you get, because if they under-design, you never get your value back in. So the process is to put as much design in as possible to get the benefit of everything you can, and then you bring it back to what you can afford. If you start too little, you never get it back in. So that's part of the process.
And second question is, when you said improving economic conditions, interest rates resulted in a change in revenue. Can you explain how interest rate changed and how did that impact the revenue picture?
All I can tell you, and Tim is here, and I know you'll go through this, but essentially, as I understand it, in the financing plan, every basis point, so as you know, a 1/4% is 25 basis points. Every basis point that interest rates falls represents about $200,000, $217,000 in our overall financing plan. So, if interest rates, I mean, that adds up pretty quickly. And we've had, from a point in time that we've talked about it until now, we've had some beneficial falling in interest rates. It's one of the reasons why we don't, frankly, and I understand everything about wanting to go through this and take the necessary time. But as I've told you before, one of the many reasons why we're being pushed so hard and pushing so hard to get this going, aside from the overall completion date, is to take advantage of the low interest rates that we have right now. They could skyrocket, they could go up at any time, and at $200,000 a basis point, you go up half a point and you're talking $10 million.
So the bottom line is interest rates went down a little bit and the financing is therefore better.
That is essentially the economic condition that's the primary economic condition we're talking about. There's some countervailing conditions too. I mean, there's things about the bidding market and stuff like that, but the big one, the overwhelming one, is interest rates.
Let Mr. Applebaum get back to his PowerPoint presentation. Do you have any more goodies for us this time?
Well, yeah, but there's one more here. I'm not sure what happened to it. I also wanted to point out.
You still have 2 more to go. You're still on the first one, right?
No. I'm almost done because I knew this would happen and it would take time. Another thing that we are going to do, and this will be, I think, good for council, is we are going to, of the guest rooms, we're going to create a mock-up right in, we have some space that won't be rented out in the next 6 months or 8 months. So in the Global Center, we're going to create a mock-up of a queen room, a king room, and some of the hallway space. So there'll be an actual mock-up right in the Global Center so people can come in, look at materials, look at design, because we'll mock it up, we'll have some ability to change and make modifications. You can look at it, touch it, feel it, talk about some of the final design changes. And that serves three purposes. First of all, it's to confirm final design decisions. People walk into the guest room, make sure they're comfortable with it. Second thing it does is when we start to build, it becomes the standard. So when someone's building, if there's a question as to whether they've met the quality standard is the mock-up. And then, of course, the other thing it's a marketing center. As we start to bring guests into town and we talk to them about staying in our great new hotel, they say, well, what's a room going to look like? Well, come on over, we'll show you a room. So that's going to be, we're going to have these mocked up rooms right in the Global Center, which is also in the GMP, by the way. That's something we're having Turner build out for us. So that's something that will probably give you a little comfort as to what's being built, because you'll get to see it well in advance. Maybe you can stay there for a night, I don't know.
Yeah, we saw the ones over at the Meritus Hotel.
Okay.
They had mock-ups. It was
So
kind of cool.
you'll see that.
But I don't think you could stay there. They were like cardboard and stuff. It looked good, but what's real?
These are going to be made out of the actual materials, though. I mean, this is the real thing. Just a couple words on the QMA. I'm going to tell you that while negotiations are ongoing, actually this morning, I feel that the last really critical issues with Hilton were resolved. We had one very major issue that, frankly, I wanted to have resolved before this meeting, because it was the only issue that I was worried about. It was kind of a late-breaking issue, but we have solved it. It simply has to do with, and we had to fight very hard to protect the county. There were some interests that the Hilton wanted with respect to the ability to perhaps to lien. I mean, if we ever defaulted, what would their rights be? And we were very firm on the limitation of those rights, and we've been able to succeed on that point. It's a highly technical legal point. We can talk about it. I'm not going to get into it right now, but we succeeded on that. All the major critical issues we think are resolved. There's still some miscellaneous issues. The parties are working through a revised draft right now. It's a very complex document, but we intend on Friday to send to you a summary of the contract, and we intend to have that contract finalized in advance of Tuesday, but with a complete summary on Friday. So that's our goal on that. There are a couple issues that are still subject to bond counsel, tax review of certain. There's some variable charges, and that's the problem we've had. We have a lot of lawyers, a lot of people that are looking at this from. There's dozens of lawyers involved in this whole process, by the way, from every angle you can think of. So it's a battleship that turns very slowly, but everyone knows the date, everyone knows the requirement. In terms of we're not going to do this. These are the terms, we've talked about these before. The financing plan, I can tell you, and Tim is here, I can tell you we had the rating agencies come in last week. We had a day-long presentation to both Standard & Poor's and Moody's. And they were very successful presentations. They liked the project. Tim, I don't know if you want to make any comment up here on that. Why don't you come up? But we are still on schedule for the hotel financing. And once again, the sources and uses I've talked about, we will present that to you prior to April 22nd. We can have some one-on-one discussions of it, but we'll have that available to you. Tim, anything else you want to add just on where we stand?
Not too much, Madam President, members of council, good afternoon. We did have the rating agency presentation last week. I think where we are on the financing plan right now is we're waiting for the GMP and the construction budget to be finished. We're moving from estimated interest rates in the financial model, which had a little bit of cushion built in, to real actual market rates. We've been lucky, frankly, that rates have been cooperating with the plan. And as the GMP and the construction budget get finalized, we'll be able to fill in the blanks for various reserve accounts that will benefit the county going forward and its financing plan, and the rating agencies like to see. And as the QMA gets finished as well, we worked very hard with Hilton to negotiate a flow of funds that I think helps the county from a bond perspective, from a rating agency perspective as well. So, to be honest, all of this stuff is going to fall into place in the next 4 or 5 days or so. And we'll roll it out for you next week. I'll be happy to address any questions that you've got.
Yeah, Tim, if let's assuming this council were to approve the whole concept next week, when do you go out there to sell the bonds? When do you package them and actually put them on the marketplace, which is this driver of the interest rates directly correlated to that?
Well, we are looking, Councilman Tron, at where interest rates are. We still have considerable amount of bond documentation to finish even after next Tuesday. It would be, one thing that drives it is bonds must be issued before the GMP is actually executed, because that's what provides the county with the ability to certify availability of funds for the entire GMP. So we'll be selling the bonds. Underwriter Stiefel signs bond purchase contract with the county. Then nearly immediately, county can sign the GMP, and everybody's ready to go. Our expectation would be last week of April, first week of May for those activities. Probably closing and funding shortly thereafter, but that's our
And
expectation.
is our treasurer or CFO, are they participating in the decision as to when to go forward? Or are we getting all of the advice from outside in regards to what the date is? Because that's always a critical date as far as when you guess what's the best date to go forward.
Madam President, the councilman, we're in daily conversation with the fiscal officer and the budget director on these items, and we are talking to them all the time regarding timing. You also, as you may know, have outside independent financial advisors that work for the county, and we're in conversation with them as well.
Thank you.
Tim, clarify for me, the bonding is being floated by the Port Authority, is that correct?
Madam President, the councilman, no, the Port Authority is involved for their economic development capabilities under state law. The Port Authority will own the land and lease the project to the county. The county's payment of rent will be the same amount of money that is the bond debt service, if you will, but the Port Authority is not technically the issuer of the bonds. The label on the front of the bond official statement, which is like a offering prospectus that you may be familiar with, that label will be County of Cuyahoga.
Then explain it in the context of the TIF. My understanding there was a non-school TIF connected, and
that's correct.
I thought only municipalities could do that. Kind of help me to understand that whole
Okay.
process.
What's going on here? County owns the site currently. Will be conveying it to the city to. It's sort of a roundabout process. Convey it to the city to facilitate the kind of TIF under state law that we need to use to benefit this project the most. Then the city will convey it to the Port Authority, and that's how the TIF is facilitated in this case. Hilton will be making the property tax payments as part of their management agreement through the port to the county, and that money will be available to pay bonds.
So after all of that passed through and ultimately comes back to the county, we are floating the bond.
That's correct.
And this question is probably bigger than you, but now, as the executive has talked about his $50 million demolition and other, do we know about what our bonding capacity is? And maybe that should not be directed to you, but now I'm thinking in context of, what are we doing with our bonding capacity and what do we have available?
Madam President, Councilman, I'll leave that question
Your
to
lifeline
others.
is coming up, so.
Excellent question, Councilman. At this point, we do not have geo bonding capacity, which is our inside millage. We would have to go to sales tax revenue first, on which we use the collections and the sales tax, which is about $230 million to back sales tax bonds. And then we also have some capacity in non-tax revenue. I do not have analysis yet, but we're working with our financial advisor to come up with a report.
When do you think you'll have a report?
I'm going to hang myself out there and say within 30 days.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted on that point to remind the council, I'm sure you all got the email. There's about 4 big ticket items that are being discussed, and the council president decided to put out a request for proposal so that the council could hire its own bond counsel, independent of everybody else, in order to give us advice around a range of projects that are either in front of us or will probably be in front of us soon. And I'd be glad to talk to anybody, off the record about that.
Yeah, just to follow up, because the question is, I mean, quite frankly, is Mr. Parks, I believe, said that we are at our level of maxed out on generate regular bonds, and
Right.
we can only do revenue-producing bonds, and we got a lot of projects out there, and we just and my question is, and I'm not asking you to answer this, but if we're maxed out one, we keep doing revenue-producing bonds, is there a point where there's no mas? I mean, that's what we need to know. We need someone with expertise to tell us. And we need our own expert to look at this and tell us.
We will attempt to do so.
I mean, because all of these things are wonderful, but we also have the major function of our county is, the health and human services and things. So, in our infrastructure and our roads and our justice center and all those things too.
I agree.
Pretty simple. We know we can borrow money.
We pay it
Can you
back.
pay for it? Can you pay for it? Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay,
All right.
Mr. Applebaum, you have other things to say, or we?
Sure, I have to look at my,
I don't know. I'm like on brain overload here.
I think that's probably a pretty good statement of where we are right now. So, understand some of the information you need, and we'll work with Bonnie on the parking issue to make sure that, in the short term, in any event, you're satisfied. Obviously, there's more conversation on long term, but I believe you're going to find out that we have solutions that will work at the time we open and take care of all the needs. But I'd be we're doing this. The reason that we're doing the study is we're all seeing that downtown, if it's going to be as successful as we hope it's going to be with the convention center and hotels, that's why there is an overall parking study being done right now to see what else should be done with respect to parking and where we play in that. And I agree with that. And I don't have all the answers. That's why the study's being done. In terms of everything else, though, we believe that we're going to be in a position to have the QMA done, the GMP amendment ready to go. You've heard about the bond financing. We're going to start to, in detail, get you summaries of these deals so that you can understand what's in them and the fine detail. We'll endeavor to have summaries to you on Friday so that at the beginning of the week when, and we're going to have to talk about how we'll engage when you see these finally on Tuesday, but we'll be here whatever time you want with whatever questions you need to have answered on Tuesday. Obviously, we hope that we can answer all your questions and be ready to go. If we fail, you'll have to do what you need to do, but I think we're going to be in a position to give you open and honest answers on everything that we have. I've always tried to do that. There are some times when there's some information that's hard to because we're in negotiation on some of it, but I'll have it all for you. Anything we haven't talked about, we'll have for you on Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, any other questions, or? All right. If Mr. Applebaum is finished, we move on. Is there any miscellaneous business? Yes, Mr. Miller?
I'm just asking a question about the status of the legislation. Either we need to vote, if we're planning on hopefully acting on this legislation next Tuesday, we either need to vote it to the full council at this time, or else we would need to have another committee of the whole meeting between now and the council meeting when we would do that.
I thought you were having another committee of the whole on this coming Tuesday.
Madam Chair, yes, originally you were sent out a group-wise invitation and the agenda for a 4 o'clock start time for Committee of the Whole. And based on the information that we just found out this morning, and depending on what you want to do here today, that agenda will be revised, resent with a new time. And I also understand that we probably need to have an executive session as well, so we have to determine when.
So we're talking about backing up to 3 o'clock.
On a collective bargaining agreement, I believe we have to have an executive session. So we're trying to get all those things figured out, how much time is needed for each, and then you will be resent a new time for the Committee of the Whole meeting.
But so at least 3 o'clock, but possibly 2? Okay. So, because we have to finish up with Mr. Applebaum, and then have an executive session. And the executive sessions beforehand when the bargaining matters seem to be much more effective beforehand. Okay. All right. Any other, so this will just stay in Committee of the Whole pursuant to, you can vote it out on this coming Tuesday. All right, any other miscellaneous business?
Chair, yes, just wanted to mention to the Human Resources Appointment and Equity Committee, we usually have 2 meetings a month. We missed last week, but I know from Jean that we're going to get some legislation. So on our off week, or a date that wouldn't usually be committee, which is the 29th, we will have a committee, Tuesday at 10 o'clock on the 29th.
All right, any public comment unrelated to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there is. Mr. Lloyd Skip Brown,
All right, Mr. Brown?
come to the podium, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. Madam Chairman and the rest of council, my name is Lloyd Skip Brown. I represent the nonprofit organization Veterans in Ohio. And I want to come to you to impress upon you the need for funding for our organization. We are a very strong organization, and we are a 501c3 advocacy group that has a long history in this community of giving forward to our veterans. I was fortunate enough yesterday to address one of the committees in reference to our function and our need, and also that we represent veterans throughout this whole district, and have a history of working all the way to the top, all the way through Washington, and been successful in reference to getting appropriation and compensation for those veterans who have fallen through the cracks. Our organization has received over $500,000 in reference to back awards that were due, cases that were latent and have been appealed through our veterans procedure with the Veterans Administration. We work directly, of course, with the Veterans Administration Hospital. We have letters to that effect that we have given out, and also a comprehensive business plan that outlines our organization and some of the outstanding war stories that we have done. In light of what has happened recently with veterans in our community and throughout the nation in reference to the PTSD issues, we're very prepared to handle those issues, both male and female. And although there is funding with some of the organizations that are presently here, we think we can be that fall net if you allow us, of course, adequate appropriations so this thing can go forward. The key is not as much as the company or the 501c3, but it's helping veterans. And we're prepared to be a part of that team and make sure this thing functions for quite a few. And I appreciate the time and opportunity to state that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. I gave him an explanation of the procedure yesterday, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, anything further? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.